Before we start, please make sure to like this video and hit this subscribe button so you never miss a story like this. And also comments where you are watching from, how many sons and daughters you have. Thanks. My name is Evelyn Hartman, and I am 71 years old. If you think life gets easier with age, let me tell you my story, because what happened to me will make you question what family really means. Backhand index pointing right. Before I continue, ask yourself this: if the people you sacrificed everything for suddenly turned their back on you, would you still keep helping them? Stick with me until the end, because my answer shocked even me. It all started on a Tuesday morning. I had just picked up the phone to call my son, Adrian, to ask when his wedding would be. I had my calendar ready, the pale lavender dress I bought hanging in my closet, and shoes polished, waiting for the big day. But before Adrian could even say a word, his fiancée Clara looked me straight in the eye with a chilling smile and said, "Oh, we already got married yesterday. We only invited special people." Those words cut deeper than a knife. Special people. I, who had paid their rent for 3 years. I, who had bought every stick of furniture in their home. I, who had filled their fridge when they had nothing to eat. I was not a special person. I stood frozen in my own living room, clutching the phone as if it weighed 1,000 pounds. My son Adrian avoided my eyes, while Clara made herself comfortable on the sofa I had bought for them with my pension savings. In my closet, the $200 lavender dress I had chosen for her wedding hung useless, along with the matching shoes, never to be worn. I had spent weeks planning the perfect outfit, imagining myself in the wedding photos that would never include me. 4 months, I had been saving $1,000 as their wedding gift. I had called my sister, Marianne, in Chicago to share the joyful news. I had scrubbed my house from top to bottom, preparing to host them after the ceremony. All of it collapsed with those 4 poisoned words: only special people. Adrian finally spoke, his voice oddly rehearsed. "Mom, it was an intimate thing. Just us and the witnesses." But I knew the truth. Because when I opened my phone later that night, I saw the photos on social media. Clara's parents stood proudly next to the bride and groom. Her siblings toasted with champagne. She wore a wedding dress I had unknowingly helped finance with the $800 I gave her for personal expenses. I saw everything I wasn't supposed to see. And for the first time I realized I had been erased. 1 week later, just 7 days after that humiliation, Clara called me again. But this time, her voice wasn't triumphant. It was desperate. "Evelyn, the rent is overdue. The landlord says if we don't pay this week, we'll be kicked out. You forgot to make the transfer." Her voice trembled as though the world was collapsing. I stayed silent. My mind replayed the countless mornings I had rushed to the bank to transfer money for their rent. The dinners I had skipped to ensure they had groceries. The $33,000 I had drained from my savings over the past 3 years to keep them afloat. And now, after excluding me from their wedding, they had the audacity to call me, expecting help as if nothing had changed. I took a deep breath and said calmly, "Clara, didn't I tell you? I only help special people." The silence on the other end was deafening. For the first time in years, it wasn't me trembling. It was her. That night, I sat on my bed and cried. Not out of sadness, but out of anger. Years of humiliation and neglect flooded through me. I wasn't crying for them, I was crying for the fool I had been. But when I woke up the next morning, something inside me had shifted. I looked in the mirror and saw the same tired wrinkles, the same eyes weighed down by sacrifice. But behind them, there was something new. Determination. That was the day I decided I would stop begging for love. I would stop financing a life where I was not welcome. And I would take back control of everything they had stolen from me, starting with my money. What I didn't know was that this decision would trigger a battle I never imagined, a war not for their rent, not for their comfort, but for my very freedom. Because Adrian and Clara weren't going to let go of their golden goose so easily. They had a plan, a dangerous one. The morning after Clara's desperate phone call, I brewed myself a cup of coffee and sat down at the dining table. But instead of setting out bills for their rent, or jotting reminders for their needs, I laid out my bank statements. For the first time in years, I wasn't calculating their survival. I was calculating the price of my own foolishness. Rent, $500 every month for 36 months. $18,000 gone. Groceries, $200 a month for 3 years. $7,200 gone. Birthdays, Christmas, anniversaries, at least $3,000. Clara's emergencies, doctor visits, prescriptions, urgent expenses, $800. The car loan Adrian promised to repay but never did, $2,500. Their broken air conditioner I paid to fix, $600. Furniture for their apartment, $1,200. When I totaled it, the number burned into my eyes. $33,400. $33,400. Not an investment. Not a loan. Just gone. It was the money my late husband, Walter, and I had saved for our retirement. The trips we dreamed of taking. The little cushion to make my final years comfortable. And I had handed it away, piece by piece, lie by lie, because I believed it would buy me love, gratitude, or at least a place in my son's life. Instead, it bought me invisibility. The phone rang. Adrian's name glowed on the screen. Once upon a time, that name would have made my heart skip. Now it only made me sigh. I let it ring. Once. Twice. 3 times. Then silence. 10 minutes later, Clara's name appeared. I let that ring too. A message followed. Mom, please answer. We need to talk. Delete. For the first time, I wasn't their safety net. For the first time, I chose myself. At 2 o'clock that afternoon, I put on my coat and walked to the park. It had been months since I had walked without a purpose, without an errand to serve them. I passed the swings where Adrian, as a little boy, used to laugh until his belly hurt. I remembered the child who hugged me tight after nightmares, whispering, "You're the best mom in the world." When had he grown into this man who treated me like an ATM with wrinkles? When had I started confusing money with love? I didn't have the answers. But I knew one thing, my story was about to change. The next morning, I walked into the bank. The branch manager, Mr. Keller, looked up and smiled. He had processed every transfer to Adrian and Clara for years, watching my account shrink with clockwork precision. "Mrs. Hartman," he greeted warmly. "Another transfer today?" "No," I said firmly. "I need to cancel all of them. Effective immediately." His smile faded. "All of them? Are you sure? After all these years?" "I'm sure," I cut him off. "And I want information on how to protect my accounts. No one else should have access to my money." For the first time in a long while, I felt lighter. As Mr. Keller processed the paperwork, my phone buzzed nonstop. Adrian. Clara. Adrian again. Almost as if they could feel the cash flow being cut off. I turned. When I slammed the door behind them, the silence that followed felt less like solitude and more like a landing, one that would either break me or set me free. I sat at my kitchen table with the leftover crumbs of a life I'd been feeding to other people. The man in the gray suit, Mr. Fisher, had left with a smile that promised trouble. Adrian and Clara had walked out with the wounded pride of people who believed they owned my life. My hands were still shaking when I dialed a number I hadn't used in years. "Evelyn Hartman," the voice answered, warm and unmistakable. "Mr. Lang, it's Evelyn. I need your help." He had been my husband Walter's lawyer. He had handled our will, the house, the small inheritance Walter left us. I had seen him as a steady lighthouse when the waters got rough. Today, I needed that lighthouse to cut through smoke and mirrors. Within hours I was sitting across from him in a walnut-paneled office that smelled of old books and honest work. I handed him copies of bank statements, digital transfer proofs, photos of the social media posts from their secret wedding. I told him, without pause, everything I had been ashamed to admit for years: the money, the favors, the nights I stayed up counting pennies so they wouldn't go without. Mr. Lang listened without interruption. When I finished, he rubbed his chin and said, "Evelyn, what they attempted at your house today is textbook elder financial abuse. They invoked the very language abusers use: concern, worry, we need to protect you. It's a legal path to strip you of control." "Can they do it?" I asked. "Declare me incompetent? Take my life away with a stamp?" "They can file a petition," he replied. "But it must be backed with evidence, medical evaluations, affidavits, and, importantly, your financial record showing irregularities you did not authorize. Which is the opposite of your case: you authorized everything." Relief washed through me. Not because I suddenly felt safe, but because the path to fight back was clear. Paper was their weapon, and paper could also be my armor. We made a list. Document everything. Gather witnesses. Request the records of any attempts to access my accounts. Change locks. Install cameras. Open a fresh account at a different bank where no one could even guess the name on the sign-up form. Update the will. And, delicate but vital, prepare for the possibility they would indeed take legal steps to seize control. Mr. Lang leaned forward. "We'll move fast. I'll draft a cease and desist, and we'll file declarations showing your competence and history of sound decisions. Do you have a primary care physician who can attest to your mental acuity?" "Yes," I said. "Dr. Morales. I see her every 6 months." "Good. I'll call her. Also, don't let them back inside your house uninvited. Change the locks today." I left his office with a folder thick with plans and a very grown-up fury. It surprised me how my anger had become a tool. Instead of hiding it, I used it. The phone off. "Mrs. Hartman," Mr. Keller said softly, "I don't mean to intrude, but I've seen you be incredibly generous. Please tell me, you're not being pressured into this?" His concern struck me harder than I expected. This man, who barely knew me beyond account numbers and signatures, was showing more genuine care than my own son had in years. I looked him straight in the eye. "No, Mr. Keller. For the first time, I'm not being pressured at all. I'm finally free." When I walked out of that bank, I felt taller, stronger, almost as if I had left 33,400 pounds of weight behind. But I didn't know, freedom would come with a price. That evening, as I returned home, I noticed 3 cars parked in front of my house. Adrian's. Clara's. And a third I didn't recognize. Through the window, I saw movement inside. Shadows. Figures. My blood ran cold. They had keys. I had trusted them with keys. I gripped the doorknob, my pulse racing. I knew, whatever waited inside would change everything. I pushed open the door. And froze. Adrian sat slumped on my sofa, his head in his hands. Clara paced like a caged lioness. At my dining table sat a man in a gray suit, rifling through my personal documents. My documents. My life. What is happening here? I demanded, louder than I intended. All 3 turned, startled. Clara spoke first, her voice dripping urgency. "Evelyn, thank God you're here. This is Mr. Fisher, from a law firm. We needed to talk about your situation." "My situation?" I repeated coldly. Adrian lifted his head, his eyes desperate. "Mom, the bank told us you canceled everything. Mr. Fisher is here to help. We're worried about you." Mr. Fisher stood, extending a hand I refused to shake. "Mrs. Hartman, I'm a family law attorney. Your children are concerned about your mental well-being. They asked me to assess the situation." I stared at the stranger in my house, at the stolen papers on my table, and a chill spread through me. This wasn't about worry. This wasn't about love. It was about control. And in that moment, I understood the terrifying truth. They weren't just trying to guilt me into helping again. They were trying to take everything.
My name is Evelina Caraway, and I am 54 years old. People think the first sign that you're gone is the funeral, the black clothes, the tears. They're wrong. The first sign that you no longer exist is silence. Not the peaceful kind of silence, the kind you find at dawn in the forest, or by the ocean where waves hush the world to sleep. No. This silence is cavernous, echoing, a hollow void where a voice should be. For me, that silence began at Gate C-14 of the Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. The fluorescent lights above hummed their mechanical tune, indifferent to the soldier who had just rolled off a military transport van after 18 months of pain and surgeries. I had texted them from the van. My fingers were stiff, clumsy, still buzzing with the electric symphonies of nerve damage. Arriving 14:20. Gate C-14. Mom is home. 2 simple lines. That was all. After everything, I thought it would be enough. Walter Reed had been my world for a year and a half. 13 surgeries. Titanium rods drilled into my spine. A leg that no longer belonged to me. The phantom itched and burned even when I tried to sleep. I had survived when many did not. I had clawed my way back from the brink. But survival, I would learn, is not the same as being wanted. I sat there in my freshly pressed dress blues, my wheelchair locked into place. I had polished my medals myself that morning, each one a memory of sacrifice. I thought at least one face would be there to meet me. Not a parade, not applause, just a sun, a hand to hold, a smile that meant home. Instead, I became a ghost in a terminal full of reunions. A father lifted his toddler into the air, the child squealing in delight. A woman leapt into the arms of a man in camouflage, their kiss full of unfiltered relief. A grandmother wept into the chest of her grandson, who looked a foot taller than the day she had last seen him. Each embrace was a small, sharp blade. They twisted in the hollow space where my family should have been. I stared at the airport clock. 14:28, 14:37. 14:52, I counted every minute like a prisoner marking days on a wall. 47 minutes passed. No one came. Not Marcus, my eldest, ambitious, the boy I sent to college with money wired from my forward operating base. Not Selena, his wife, a woman of weaponized smiles who once scolded me for preferring handwritten letters. "We have to embrace efficiency, Evelina," she'd said, her voice smooth as glass. Neither of them appeared. Not a text. Not a call. Just silence. The transport driver, a kind man with pity in his eyes, offered to wait longer. I shook my head. A flick of my wrist, sharp, commanding, the way I used to signal soldiers in the field. Pride is a strange, stubborn muscle. It flexes even when your legs no longer will. I wheeled myself toward the taxi stand. My phone trembled in my hand as I checked again. The message was marked as read. Still no reply. Everything was correct, the signal, the time, the contact. Everything except for the part where anyone cared. As the driver loaded my chair into the trunk, his eyes flickered, surprise, discomfort, maybe even guilt. At the sight of the uniform. He said nothing. Neither did I. We drove in silence heavier than the one at the airport. Out the window, the highway cut between towering Douglas firs, their green so deep it was almost black. The world outside was alive, vibrant. And yet my name had been erased from the memory of the people I thought would never forget. As we neared my neighborhood, the affluent hills overlooking the Sound, I gave the driver an unusual instruction. "Drop me 3 blocks from the house." He frowned but said nothing. A $20 bill smoothed over his curiosity. Because here's the truth, when you suspect betrayal, you don't walk through the front door. You approach like a soldier on reconnaissance. I wanted to see my life from the outside. The car pulled away, leaving me in the damp twilight air. My chair hummed quietly as I rolled closer, my pulse steady but cold. And then, through the hedge of my neighbor's yard, I saw it. My house. The cedar beams. The river rock pillars. The wraparound porch where my late husband and I had once watched ferries glide across the water, fingers laced, talking about nothing and everything. But now, 2 cars sat in the driveway. Marcus's sleek black sedan. And my own pearl-white SUV. Selena had insisted on using it while I was recovering. It just makes sense, Evelina. We'll keep an eye on things. The porch light flicked on, triggered by an automatic timer, reset by someone else's hand. Then the front door opened. A figure stepped out, silhouetted against warm interior light. It was Selena. She wore my silk robe. The one my husband had given me on our 20th anniversary in Kyoto, embroidered with pale cherry blossoms that seemed to bloom under the glow of the porch lamp. In her hand, a wine glass. Her laughter echoed brittle and false as she leaned into her phone, her voice dripping with performative joy. Piece by piece, she had taken it all. My car. My robe. My house. My life. I expected rage. Or grief. Something hot, violent. Instead, what washed over me was colder. Cleaner. It was the pristine emptiness of a battlefield after the fighting is over. The kind of clarity that soldiers know well, when all that's left is silence, wreckage, and the question of what comes next. I didn't go to the door. I didn't announce my return. I turned my chair around, the soft whir of the electric motor barely audible under the dusk. Because sometimes, the moment you realize you are unwanted is the moment you are handed the most profound freedom of all. The freedom to plan. And I intended to use every last bit of it. What would you have done in that moment? Confront them immediately, or turn away and plan in silence? Stay tuned, because in Chapter 2, I'll show you how I uncovered the betrayal that went far deeper than just a stolen robe or car. And the night I returned to Seattle, I realized my life had been stolen piece by piece. The taxi dropped me 3 blocks away, but I didn't go home. Not yet. I sat in the shadows, my wheelchair hidden behind the hedge of my neighbor's property, watching my own front porch like a soldier watching enemy territory. I had learned in Afghanistan that sometimes, patience is your sharpest weapon. You don't rush into the fray. You wait. You observe. You make sense of the battlefield before you take your first step. From my vantage point, my house looked the same as the day I left it. The cedar beams rose proudly into the night sky. The river rock pillars glistened faintly from the mist. The porch light glowed warm and welcoming, as if nothing had changed. But everything had. I saw her. Selena. My daughter-in-law. Marcus's wife. The woman who, for over a decade, had smiled with calculated sweetness while slowly pushing me further to the margins of my own family. And now she stood there in my silk robe, the one my late husband had bought for me in Kyoto, sipping wine like a queen on her throne. I should have felt fury. But what I felt instead was worse. I felt invisible. I watched as she paced the porch, laughing into her phone, her voice sharp and high, the kind of laugh that doesn't touch the eyes. She had claimed my home. My possessions. And, by the look of her comfort, even my memory. I didn't go to the door. I didn't wheel up the driveway and demand answers. No. Soldiers don't march into ambushes. I turned away. Quiet. Controlled. Planning. Because I knew something deep in my bones. This was more than a borrowed robe or a parked car. This was war. And wars aren't won with emotion. They're won with strategy. That night, I checked into a faded roadside motel off the interstate, the Sprucewood Inn. The place smelled faintly of mildew. The carpet sagged with years of neglect. The mattress dipped in the center like a tired sigh. But it was perfect. A command center. A ghost's hideout. For the first time in 18 months, no one knew where I was. Not my sons. Not Selena. Not anyone. I paid in cash. Registered under my maiden name. The man at the desk didn't even ask for ID. He slid me a key card without meeting my eyes, his attention fixed on the glowing TV in the corner. Perfect. That night, as the walls trembled with the snores of the man in the room next door, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my mind sharp with purpose. They hadn't just forgotten me. They had erased me. And I needed to find out how deep that erasure went. The next morning, I dressed plainly and went downtown. Not to my familiar local bank branch, where the tellers knew my name, my history, my late husband's, no. I chose the imposing headquarters instead. A place of anonymity. The clerk was young, professional, her smile rehearsed. She typed my information into her computer, and then I saw it, the tiny shift in her posture, the tightening around her mouth. Something was wrong. She tried to keep her tone neutral as she asked me to wait. Her fingers hovered over the keys a little too long. Finally, she looked up. "Ms. Carraway, there's been significant activity on your accounts." My stomach tightened, but my face remained still. I had learned long ago how to keep my emotions beneath the surface. "Print everything," I said. My voice was flat, a soldier giving orders. Page after page slid into a growing stack. Withdrawals I hadn't made. Transfers to accounts I didn't recognize. And then, the dagger. A new family trust. Opened under a name eerily similar to my late husband's. Trustees, Marcus and Selina Carraway. My son. My blood. And the woman in my robe. They had used the power of attorney I had signed on a hospital gurney before my third surgery. The one Marcus told me was just a formality. My chest burned. But still, my face betrayed nothing. I thanked the clerk, tucked the manila folder under my arm, and rolled out of the bank into the damp Seattle air. Now I knew. They weren't just living in my home. They had stolen my life on paper, too. My next stop was the office of Arthur Penbrook, the estate lawyer who had handled my late husband's affairs. A man of old-world sensibilities, mahogany shelves lined with leather-bound books, the faint scent of lemon polish clinging to the air. When I rolled through his door, his composure cracked. He blinked twice, his mouth falling open before he quickly snapped it shut. "Evelina?" His voice trembled. "They told me you were unresponsive. That you'd never." He stopped himself. I held up the manila folder. "They lied." Arthur's face paled as he shuffled through the papers I laid before him. He reached for his own file, his fingers shaking. Then he turned his computer screen toward me. Emails. A carefully curated stream of correspondence from Selina. Her tone was syrupy sweet, full of concern about my declining state. She wrote about how difficult it was to see me fade. She asked gentle, probing questions about succession planning. She urged swift transition for the good of the family. But behind the veil of sympathy, the truth was clear. They were circling. Waiting. Preparing to bury me while my heart was still beating. Arthur looked ashamed. I stalled. Something about their eagerness, it felt wrong. I kept waiting for more medical documentation. I nodded. He had bought me time without knowing it. Now I had what I needed. I wasn't just a forgotten soldier anymore. I was a ghost carrying evidence. And ghosts are dangerous because no one sees them coming. That night, back in my motel room, I spread the documents across the sagging mattress. Bank statements. Emails. Trust paperwork. Proof. I wasn't dealing with carelessness or misunderstanding. I was dealing with a hostile takeover. And as I sat in the dim yellow light of the motel lamp, a strange calm settled over me. This wasn't just about reclaiming my home or my money. It was about reclaiming my name. My existence. My life. And this war, unlike the one overseas, wasn't going to be fought with bullets. It was going to be fought with strategy, patience, and precision. I wasn't just coming back. I was coming back for everything. What would you have done if you discovered your own child forged papers to erase you? In Chapter 3, I'll take you inside my first counterattack, the moment I stepped into the shadows of my old life and began dismantling their lies from the inside. The next morning, I rose before dawn. Old habits die hard. In Afghanistan, I had learned to move before the world stirred. Dawn was the hour of ghosts, the time when you could slip unseen between shadows, when the line between night and day blurred. And now, I needed to be a ghost again. The spruce wood in shower sputtered lukewarm water as I sat on the bench inside, letting the spray wash the motel's stale air off my skin. I wrapped myself in one of my old field tricks, cold clarity before battle. When I rolled out into the morning mist, the streets of Seattle were still hushed. The sky was gray, a bruise spreading over the city. My first target wasn't my home. Not yet. It was Marcus's office. My son was a financial consultant in a glass and steel building downtown. I hadn't set foot in that part of the city in years, but I knew the terrain. I had studied it during long afternoons when my body was broken, and my mind had nowhere to go but memory. I didn't go inside. Instead, I waited across the street, hidden in the tide of pedestrians. I watched. Observed. At 8:03 a.m., Marcus arrived. My son, once the boy who used to climb trees barefoot, now a polished man in a navy suit, his gait confident, his phone pressed to his ear. I tried to read his face. Was there guilt there? A flicker of hesitation? No. His stride was clean, his brow smooth. He carried himself like a man who had already buried his past and built a kingdom on its grave. My kingdom. The sight hardened something inside me. I knew then that there would be no appeal to conscience. No tearful reunion. No mother-son embrace. This wasn't about forgiveness anymore. It was about survival. That afternoon, I went to the library. Not the public one downtown where half the city roamed, but a quiet branch tucked between shuttered storefronts. The kind of place where the elderly librarians still stamped cards and the computers hummed like tired bees. I signed in under another false name. Sat at the farthest computer. And began digging. Public records. Corporate filings. Property deeds. Piece by piece, I mapped the empire they had built using my name. The trust. The shell accounts. The quiet sale of some of my late husband's stocks. It wasn't sloppy. No, Selena was smarter than I'd given her credit for. Every move was cloaked in legality. Every document airtight. But every empire has a crack. And after 3 hours of staring at digital paper trails, I found it. A property. A house purchased 6 months ago under the family trust. Not my house, not Marcus's. A new one. Smaller. Suburban. Paid for in part by liquidating one of my old accounts. And the deed carried a co-owner's name I didn't recognize. Daniel Cross. I leaned back, my pulse quickening. Who was he? A partner? An accomplice? A lover? I didn't know yet. But I knew this, Selena had a secret. And secrets can topple empires. That night, I staged my first move. I returned to my own neighborhood, but not to storm the gates. No. I slipped into the shadows like the soldier I used to be. The moon was thin, the kind of sliver that gave just enough light for careful work. I wheeled silently down the alley behind my house, the tires of my chair muffled by damp leaves. The back fence was new. Taller. Reinforced. But I saw what they hadn't, a panel where the wood hadn't been sealed properly yet. I pushed. The slat creaked. And then, with a careful nudge, it gave way. I slid inside. For the first time in nearly 2 years, I was standing, well, sitting, on my own soil. The air smelled of cedar and damp earth. The garden beds I had tended with my bare hands were overgrown, weeds strangling the roses my husband once planted for me. I moved closer. The house loomed above me, glowing faintly with warm light. Through the kitchen window, I saw them. Marcus at the table, papers spread before him. Selina pouring wine, her movements practiced, elegant. They looked like a couple in perfect harmony. But I knew the truth, perfect harmony often hides the sharpest knives. And then I saw something that made my breath catch. On the mantel, above the fireplace where my wedding photo used to hang, was a new frame. A family portrait. Marcus. Selina. Their 2 children. No me. No trace of the woman who had built that home, brick by brick, sacrifice by sacrifice. I felt the sting of tears, but I swallowed them down. I wasn't here to weep. I was here to strike. I retreated into the darkness, retracing my path until the night swallowed me whole. Back at the motel, I spread out my evidence once more. My mind worked like it had in the field, analyzing, dissecting, planning. Direct confrontation would fail. Marcus would deny. Selina would charm. The law would see only signatures and papers. But secrets? Secrets were weapons. And I had just found the name of one, Daniel Cross. The following day, I made my way to the county records office. I requested files under the guise of a researcher. My hands trembled slightly as the clerk handed me a folder thick with documents. Inside, mortgage records, tax filings, and, buried deep, a lien notice. Daniel Cross wasn't a wealthy man. He wasn't an equal partner. He was drowning in debt. And somehow, Selina had tied him to the family trust. The pieces clicked into place. Selina wasn't just stealing. She was building leverage. Tying my fortune to a man vulnerable enough to be controlled. A pawn. Or perhaps, something more. I closed the file, my pulse steady now. For the first time since stepping off that plane, I felt something close to power. I had found their crack. And I was going to widen it until the whole empire fell. That night, as the city lights blurred past my cab window, I whispered to myself. You thought you buried me. But I'm still here. And I'm coming for you. The soldier in me was awake again. The ghost had risen. And my first counterattack had just begun. If you were in my position, would you expose your own son to destroy the woman controlling him? In Chapter 4, I'll reveal how I stepped into Selina's secret world, and uncovered a betrayal darker than I imagined. When you've lived through war, you learn one rule: never underestimate the enemy. And make no mistake, Selina wasn't just a conniving daughter-in-law. She was an enemy. But enemies always leave trails. And I had just found hers. It started with a phone call. I sat in my motel room, the yellow lamp humming softly, the manila folders spread out before me like war maps. In the center, one name stood out in bold black ink: Daniel Cross. A man drowning in debt. A man tied to my stolen fortune. But who was he to Selina? I dialed a number from the lien notice, expecting an answering machine, maybe a law office. Instead, a weary male voice answered on the second ring. This is Cross. His tone was defensive, impatient, the voice of someone used to collectors breathing down his neck. I paused. A soldier knows when to strike, but also when to disguise her weapon. So I became someone else. Mr. Cross? This is Evelyn from Cascade Properties. I'm confirming some details about the property on Willowbrook Lane. Silence. A sharp inhale. Then, his voice dropped to a growl. I told her not to put that in my name. Her. Selina. Bingo. Before I could press further, he hung up. But it was enough. There was tension between them. A fracture. And fractures, if pressed, become breaks. The next evening, I rolled myself into a place I never thought I'd step into again, the Starlight Lounge. A dim little bar with neon signs that buzzed like insects, and leather booths that smelled of stale whiskey. The kind of place where desperate men like Daniel Cross went to drown the weight of their mistakes. I waited. Quiet. Patient. A ghost in the corner, nursing a glass of soda water while pretending it was vodka. And at 9:17 p.m., he appeared. Tall, broad-shouldered, but his face was tired. Handsome once, maybe, but worn down now by choices that chased him like wolves. He slid into a booth with a drink already waiting for him, poured by a bartender who clearly knew his story. I watched. Listened. 2 drinks in, he loosened. His voice carried across the room as he muttered to the bartender, "She promised me it would fix everything. Now I've got my name on a trust one don't even control. If Marcus finds out." Marcus. So my son didn't know. The revelation hit like a bullet. My son was complicit in my erasure, yes, but blind to the full extent of Selina's game. She wasn't just manipulating me. She was manipulating him. And she had a side piece drowning in debt, tied legally to my fortune. Selina's secret world was unraveling. I waited until Daniel left, then followed. Not close enough to be noticed, just enough to keep his figure in sight as he staggered through the misty streets toward a low-rent apartment complex. He didn't look back. Men like him rarely did. When he disappeared inside, I knew I had him. Not yet as an ally, but as a liability. And liabilities can be weaponized. Back at the motel, I mapped my next step. Direct confrontation with Selina would be suicide. She thrived on control, charm, manipulation. She would spin lies faster than I could reveal truths. But Daniel? Daniel was the crack in her armor. All I needed was to push. The following afternoon, I waited outside his apartment complex, bundled in an old coat, my chair half hidden behind a broken fence. When Daniel emerged, sunglasses hiding the bloodshot eyes of another long night, I made my move. "Mr. Cross." He stopped. His head snapped toward me, suspicion flashing across his face. "Who the hell are you?" I met his stare, steady, unflinching. "The woman whose life Selina stole. The woman whose money is paying for that house you're drowning in." His jaw clenched. For a moment, I thought he might walk away. But then his shoulders sagged. "Figures," he muttered. "She told me you were." He stopped. "Dead?" I asked softly. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The truth was written across his face. We sat on a bench by the street. I laid out my evidence, the bank transfers, the trust documents, the emails. Daniel cursed under his breath. Ran his hands through his hair. "She said Marcus was in on it. That it was all family business. She said." "She lied," I cut him off. My voice was cold steel. "Selina is using you. And when she's finished, she'll let you take the fall. Do you think she'll protect you when Marcus finds out?" His face drained of color. He knew the answer already. For the first time, Daniel looked less like a threat and more like a man cornered by his own bad choices. A pawn. But pawns, when cornered, sometimes turn into weapons. That night, in the quiet of my motel room, I considered the dangerous path ahead. If I aligned with Daniel, I could expose Selina. Use his debt, his connection to the trust, his fear of Marcus as leverage. But trusting a drowning man meant risking being pulled under with him. Still, the soldier in me knew, wars aren't won alone. And I was preparing for the battle of my life. The next day, Daniel slipped me an envelope. Inside were photographs. Selina. In a restaurant. Not with Marcus. With Daniel. Their hands touching across the table. Their faces close, intimate. Proof. I stared at the glossy paper, my chest tightening. This was it. The weapon I needed. Selina's secret world wasn't just about stolen money. It was about betrayal. Adultery. Lies layered so deep that Marcus, the son I had raised, the boy I had once cradled through fevered nights, had no idea his wife was playing him like a fiddle. The ghost in me smiled. I had my first real weapon. And soon, I would aim it straight at the heart of Selina's empire. If you discovered your daughter-in-law was not only stealing your fortune but betraying your son, would you reveal the truth, or use it to set a trap? In Chapter 5, I'll tell you how I laid my plan, and how the first strike shook their perfect world to its core. And after 18 months of surgeries, silence, and betrayal, my war was no longer overseas. It was here, at home. The photographs burned in my hand like live embers. Selina and Daniel, her fingers curled around his, her eyes lit not with love, but with possession. It wasn't just betrayal of me. It was betrayal of my son. The son I had nearly died for. For hours I stared at those glossy images in the thin motel lamplight. Rage rose in waves, but I forced it back. Rage is sloppy. Rage loses wars. Strategy wins. And this was no longer just about reclaiming my life. It was about showing Marcus the truth. The truth that would crack Selina's glass mask once and for all. I called Daniel the next morning. My voice was even, clipped, the voice of a commanding officer giving orders. You're going to help me deliver these. Not to the courts. Not to the lawyers. To Marcus himself. He hesitated. If she finds out. She will, I cut him off. But by then, it'll be too late. Daniel swallowed. He was weak, but fear has a way of sharpening obedience. And so the plan was set. 2 nights later, the Veterans Hall hosted a charity gala. Selina thrived in such places, silk gowns, whispered admiration, cameras capturing her every polished smile. She would be there. So would Marcus. And so would I. I arrived early, dressed in a black evening suit that bore no medals, no insignias. Just simplicity and silence. My chair glided over the polished wood floors as if I had always belonged there. No one noticed the ghost in the room. Not until the lights dimmed. At precisely 8:10, Marcus and Selina entered. He in a tailored suit, crisp and proud. She in a crimson gown, diamonds glittering like the stolen lives of others. Her laugh carried across the room, too loud, too staged. She believed herself untouchable. Good. Because the higher you climb, the harder you fall. The speeches began. Donors were thanked, tributes made. And then, during the interlude, I gave Daniel his cue. He approached Marcus, nervous but rehearsed, and handed him a sealed envelope. For your eyes only, Daniel muttered, before vanishing into the crowd. Marcus frowned, confused, but curiosity is a powerful drug. He tore the seal. And the moment his eyes landed on the first photograph, his face changed. I watched from across the room as the color drained. His jaw tightened. His breathing quickened. His hand trembled as he flipped to the next, and the next. Selina noticed. Her laughter faltered. She leaned in, whispering something sharp, but Marcus pulled back. He was no longer listening. The truth was a blade, and it had finally found its target. Minutes later, chaos unfolded. Marcus stormed out, the photographs clutched like evidence in a trial only he could see. Selina followed, her face twisted in panic, hissing his name. Cameras flashed as they pushed through the crowd, the perfect couple unraveling in front of their adoring audience. I didn't follow. I didn't need to. The truth was loose now. And once truth escapes, it never returns quietly. The fallout was immediate. Marcus confronted her at home, and neighbors whispered of shouts that shook the walls. A week later, he moved out, his German sedan gone from the driveway, leaving Selina alone in my stolen house. Bank accounts froze. The eviction notice landed like a hammer. By the time the locks were changed, Selina had fled, back to Daniel's dingy apartment, if rumors were to be believed. I didn't see her go. I didn't need to. I had already erased her as she once tried to erase me. But Marcus came to me. It was a Sunday morning, gray skies heavy with rain. I was packing boxes in my rented cottage when the knock came. When I opened the door, he stood there, suit rumpled, eyes hollow, looking more like the boy I once knew than the man who had betrayed me. "Mom," he said, his voice breaking on the word. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I studied him. My son. My blood. My disappointment. "You didn't want to hear," I said quietly. "You chose her truth over mine." Tears welled in his eyes. He reached for me, but I held up a hand. Some wounds never close. Some scars warn us we're not to tread again. "I'm not here to fix what you broke," I said. "I'm here to remind you, I survived. And I will keep surviving, with or without you." His face crumpled, but I closed the door before he could answer. And for the first time, I felt no guilt. That night, I sat by the window, the rain tapping against the glass. My phone buzzed on the table. A message from an unknown number. "This isn't over. You think you've won, but ghosts can be hunted too." No name. But I didn't need one. Selena. She wasn't gone. Not yet. And part of me knew, this was only the beginning of another war. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and let the weight of silence settle over me. Not the empty silence of abandonment, but the fierce silence of a soldier waiting for her next move. Because I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the hunter. And if Selena wanted war, she would learn what it meant to fight a ghost who refused to die. If your own child betrayed you for a manipulative partner, and that partner swore revenge even after you exposed them, would you cut ties forever?